Outlaws kidnapped a woman until Comanche warriors save her. The sun had just begun to rise over the wide Texas plains, painting the sky with soft pink and orange colors. The air was cool and quiet. In the distance, a small group of buildings stood alone, surrounded by fields of tall grass. This was the home of a family who had come to the frontier to start a new life. They had left behind the noise and crowded streets of the East, hoping for peace and freedom. They wanted to build something of their own, even if it meant working hard every day. The family lived in a simple wooden house. It was not large or fancy, but it was strong enough to keep them safe from storms and animals. The house had a small porch where they could sit and watch the world. Near the house, there was a barn with a few horses and cattle. A vegetable garden grew nearby, full of green leaves and bright vegetables. The family had planted the garden with hope. They wanted to eat fresh food and share it with neighbors when they could. The woman who lived there was called Sarah. She was in her early 20s, but she had a calm and strong heart. She was gentle in her voice, but she was also brave. Sarah had dark hair that she usually tied back in a simple knot. Her hands were rough from working in the fields, but she always kept a kind smile for her family. She believed that the land could give them a good life if they cared for it. Sarah lived with her husband Thomas and their young son Jacob. Thomas was a quiet man who worked from dawn until dusk. He was a hard worker, always fixing things, building fences, and taking care of the animals. He had a deep love for his family and would do anything to keep them safe. Jacob was only 6 years old. He was full of energy and curiosity. He loved to run around the fields, chase butterflies, and help his mother gather eggs from the hen house. He had a bright smile and eyes that looked like the sky. The family had come to Texas because they wanted freedom. They wanted to live where no one would tell them what to do. They wanted to raise their son in a place where he could grow strong and independent. They dreamed of a future where they could own their land, build a better home, and maybe even start a small business. These dreams kept them going even when the days were hard. Life on the frontier was not easy. The weather could change suddenly. One day it could be warm and sunny, and the next day it could be cold and rainy. The family had to work hard just to survive. They woke up early every morning and went to bed late. They fixed fences, planted crops, fed the animals, and cooked meals over a wood fire. They also had to be careful of strangers because there were many people traveling through the area. Some were friendly, but others were not. Despite the hard work, Sarah loved the quiet of the plains. She loved the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass. She loved the way the sky looked at night, full of stars that seemed to shine brighter than anywhere else. She often sat on the porch after dinner, holding a cup of warm tea, and listened to the world. She felt a peaceful calm that she had never felt before. But even in this peaceful place, there were worries. Sarah and Thomas knew that the frontier was not always safe. They had heard stories from other settlers about people who had lost their belongings or had been taken away from their homes. Some families had been forced to leave because they felt unsafe. The news of these events spread quickly, and it made people nervous. Still, Sarah tried not to think about those stories too much. She believed that if they worked hard and stayed careful, they would be fine. She taught Jacob to always be respectful and polite to others. She told him to never wander too far from home and to always stay close to the house at night. She wanted him to grow up strong, but she also wanted him to stay safe. One evening, as the sun began to set, Sarah stood in the kitchen and prepared dinner. The smell of cooking vegetables and warm bread filled the room. Jacob was sitting at the table, drawing pictures on a piece of paper. He drew a picture of a big house with a fence and a garden full of flowers. He wanted their home to become bigger one day. Thomas came inside after a long day of work. He looked tired, but his eyes were calm. He sat down at the table and smiled at Sarah. He always tried to keep a positive spirit, even when things were difficult. He said, "The fields are doing well. The rain last week helped the crops grow." Sarah nodded and said, "That's good. Maybe this year we will have enough to sell some of the vegetables in town." They ate quietly, enjoying the food and the simple comfort of being together. Jacob talked about his day, telling them about the birds he saw and the funny shapes of clouds. His innocence brought a warm feeling to the room. For a moment, everything felt perfect. It felt like their dreams were becoming real. After dinner, the family went outside to the porch. The sky was clear, and the stars were beginning to appear. The wind moved gently, and the night was calm. Sarah sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching Jacob play with a small wooden toy. Thomas stood nearby, looking at the horizon. He seemed deep in thought.
"Do you think we will ever be truly safe here?" Sarah asked softly. Thomas looked at her and then at the dark fields.
He paused for a moment before answering. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but we must believe that we can make a good life. We must stay careful and help each other. That is the only way." Sarah nodded, but she could feel a small worry inside her. She wanted to believe in safety, but she also knew the truth. The world was not always kind. She had heard of travelers who were taken by strangers. She had heard of people who lost everything because of one bad decision. She did not want that to happen to her family. Still, she tried to focus on the good. She thought about how far they had come. She thought about the hard work that had brought them this far. She thought about the future they were building. She believed in the strength of her family. She believed in the power of love and hope. That night, they locked the doors and windows, as they always did. They made sure the animals were safe and that the fire was out. They wanted to feel secure in their home. Jacob fell asleep quickly, tired from his day. Sarah and Thomas stayed awake for a little longer, talking softly about their plans. They spoke about the crops, the animals, and the possibility of saving money to build a better home. When they finally went to bed, the house was quiet. The wind moved outside, and the stars shone above. Everything seemed peaceful, but the peace was fragile. In the days that followed, Sarah noticed a change in the atmosphere. She felt as if someone was watching them from a distance. She heard the sound of horses in the night, far away, but close enough to be noticed. She saw footprints near the edge of their property, though they were too far to identify clearly. She told Thomas about it, and he tried to calm her fears. "Maybe it's just travelers passing by," he said. "People come through this area all the time." Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that their worries were only in her mind, but she could not shake the feeling that something was not right. One evening, a traveler arrived at their home. He was a man in his 30s with a tired face. He carried a small bag and looked like he had been traveling for days. Sarah and Thomas welcomed him inside. They offered him food and water. They believed in helping others, especially those who were far from home. The traveler introduced himself as Mr. Baca Collins. He said he was heading to a nearby town to find work. He spoke politely and seemed friendly. He thanked them for their kindness and stayed for the night. Sarah felt relieved. It seemed like a simple, harmless visit. She hoped that her fears were wrong. After the traveler left the next morning, Sarah felt a strange calm. Maybe her worries had been too much. Maybe everything was fine. But the next week, more travelers passed by. Some were friendly, and some were quiet. Some looked at the house for a long time, as if they were trying to remember its shape. Sarah felt the worry returning. She started to pay more attention to the sounds of the night. She began to notice small things that she had not noticed before. She saw the shadow of a person moving near the tree line. She heard whispers in the distance. She saw the flicker of a small fire far away, as if someone was camping nearby. She told Thomas, and he listened carefully. He started to take extra precautions. He checked the locks on the doors. He built a stronger fence around the property. He also spoke to other neighbors to see if they had noticed anything. The neighbors said they had heard rumors of people traveling through the area, looking for places that seemed easy to take advantage of. Some said that the outlaws were looking for families who lived alone. They wanted to take what they could and leave quickly. Thomas listened to these stories and felt his heart tighten. He knew that their family was small and isolated. He knew that they were not prepared to fight or defend themselves. He wished he could do more. He wished he could protect his family better. Sarah saw the worry in his eyes. She wanted to comfort him, but she also felt scared. She knew that the world could be harsh. She also knew that they had no choice but to stay strong. They had to keep living and keep hoping. One night, the wind blew harder than usual. The sky was dark, and the stars were hidden behind clouds. Sarah could not sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the sounds outside. She heard a distant noise, like the sound of horses moving slowly. She felt her heart beat faster. She sat up and listened. The sound grew closer. She could not tell if it was real or if her fear was making it louder. She looked at Thomas, who was still asleep. She did not want to wake him and cause him worry, but she also knew that they needed to be careful. Sarah quietly got out of bed and went to the window. She pulled back the curtain and looked out. In the distance, she saw a group of figures moving near the tree line. They were dark shapes against the night. She could not see their faces, but she could see that they were on horses. Her stomach tightened. She knew something was wrong. She returned to bed and whispered to Thomas, "I think there are people outside." Thomas woke up immediately. His eyes were wide with concern. He listened carefully. He could hear the soft sound of horses moving. He whispered, "Stay calm. We will be fine." He quietly got out of bed and moved to the door. He opened it slightly and looked outside. He saw the figures, but they were too far away to be certain. He felt a deep fear in his chest. He knew that if they were the people he feared, then their family was in danger. Thomas closed the door and returned to Sarah. He whispered, "We need to stay calm and wait. If they come closer, we will decide what to do." Sarah nodded. Her hands were shaking, but she tried to stay strong. She thought of Jacob sleeping in the next room. She thought of her family and the life they had built. She did not want to lose it all. They waited in silence, listening to the sounds outside.
The night felt long.
Every small noise seemed louder. Every shadow seemed to move. Sarah felt her fear growing, but she tried to hold on to hope. The figures stayed at a distance for a long time. Sarah could not tell if they were watching or if they were just passing by. The night felt endless. The wind continued to blow, and the world seemed quiet and still. Finally, after what felt like hours, the figures moved away. The sound of horses faded into the distance. The night became quiet again. Sarah and Thomas did not speak. They stayed in bed, holding each other quietly. They knew that the danger might return. They knew that their lives could change in an instant. They did not know what the future would bring. But they also knew something else. They knew that they were not alone. They had each other. They had hope, and they had the strength to face whatever came next. The next morning, the sun rose again, bright and warm. Sarah and Thomas looked at each other with tired eyes. They knew that the day would be difficult. They knew that their lives might never be the same. But they also knew that they had to keep going. They went outside, and the world looked peaceful again. The fields were calm, and the animals were quiet. The wind moved gently through the grass. It was as if nothing had happened. But Sarah knew that something had changed. She felt it in her heart. She felt the fear that had been growing inside her. She knew that the danger was not gone. She looked at Thomas and said softly, "We need to be ready." Thomas nodded.
"We will be," he said. They returned to their work, trying to act as if everything was normal.
They smiled and spoke kindly to each other. They tried to keep their hope alive, but deep inside, they both knew that their life on the frontier was about to be tested. They did not know how or when. They only knew that they would have to stay strong, and they would have to trust in each other. And so, the quiet days continued, with a shadow of fear hidden just beyond the edge of the fields. The family worked hard, and they tried to stay calm. They hoped that the danger would pass. They hoped that their dreams would not be taken away. But the world had a different plan. The morning after the night of shadows, the sun rose gently over the plains, but the air felt different. It was as if the world was holding its breath. Sarah stood at the edge of the garden, looking out toward the distant trees. The plants were bright and green and the animals were calm, but she still felt a nervous energy inside her. She tried to tell herself that the shadows were only travelers and that there was no real danger, but her heart did not believe it. Thomas came outside carrying a bucket of water. He looked tired, but he tried to keep his face calm. He noticed Sarah's worried eyes and walked over to her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded slowly. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice sounded unsure. She looked at him and said, "Maybe we should leave. Maybe we should go to town for a few days." Thomas paused. He knew that moving would be difficult. They had animals, food, and tools. They had built their home with their own hands. Leaving would mean losing everything they had worked for. But he also knew that Sarah was not someone who worried without reason. He looked at her carefully and said, "I don't want to leave our home, but I also don't want to take any risks. Let's stay alert. We will watch for anything unusual." Sarah nodded again. She did not want to leave either, but she also did not want to live in fear. She wanted to feel safe in her own home. She wanted to believe that the world could be kind. They spent the morning doing their usual work, but their minds were not fully on the tasks. Every sound made them look up. Every movement in the distance made them tense. Jacob noticed the change in his parents and asked, "What's wrong?" Sarah smiled gently at him and said, "Nothing, my love. Everything is fine." She reached out and touched his hair. "Just go play, okay?" Jacob nodded and ran toward the field with his toy. He did not understand the worry that his parents felt. He only knew that he wanted to be happy and safe. The day passed slowly. Sarah and Thomas tried to keep busy, but the feeling of unease stayed with them. They talked quietly about what they should do. They decided to make sure the doors were locked at night and that the animals were secured. They also decided to check the perimeter of their property for any signs of people passing by. In the afternoon, Thomas went to the edge of the property with a rope and a small knife. He wanted to mark the area and make sure they could see any new footprints. He looked at the ground carefully, searching for signs of movement. He found a few marks that seemed new. The marks were faint, but they were there. Someone had been near their home. He returned to the house and told Sarah what he had found. Sarah's face turned pale. She felt her stomach tighten. She knew that the danger was closer than they had thought. "That means they are watching us," she whispered. Thomas nodded slowly.
Yes, he said, but we still don't know who they are. Sarah felt a wave of fear.
She did not know what to do. She felt trapped between wanting to protect her family and wanting to stay in the home they loved. That evening, the family sat together for dinner. The meal was simple, but they tried to enjoy it. Sarah served the food quietly, and Thomas sat at the table with a serious look on his face. Jacob talked about his day, but his parents' silence made him stop. He looked at them and said, "Are you sad?" Sarah's eyes softened. She smiled and said, "No, sweetheart. We are just thinking." She reached out and held his hand. "We love you very much." Thomas nodded and said, "We are okay. We just need to stay careful." Jacob nodded and continued eating. He did not fully understand, but he knew that his parents were worried. He tried to be brave. After dinner, Sarah and Thomas sat on the porch again. The night was calm, but the air felt heavy. The stars were bright, but the peace felt fragile. Sarah could not stop thinking about the marks on the ground. She wondered who could be watching them. She wondered if they would ever feel safe again. Thomas stood up and said, "I'm going to check the perimeter again." Sarah looked at him with concern. "Be careful," she said. Thomas nodded and walked into the darkness. He carried a lantern, and the light moved slowly across the grass. Sarah watched him disappear into the night. She felt a deep worry, but she also felt proud of him. He was trying to protect his family. She went back inside and sat near the window, watching the dark fields. She listened to the sounds of the night. Everything was quiet, but she felt as if the quiet was hiding something. She tried to calm herself by thinking of the good things in her life. She thought of the garden, the animals, and the love of her family. She thought of the future they were building, but the fear would not go away. At midnight, Sarah heard a sound outside. It was not loud, but it was different. It sounded like the soft movement of something near the house. She held her breath and listened. The sound came again, closer this time. She stood up slowly and walked toward the door. She opened it slightly and looked outside. She could see a shadow near the fence. It was moving slowly, like someone trying to be quiet. Sarah felt her heart race. She closed the door quickly and ran to Thomas. She shook him gently. "Thomas," she whispered, "there is someone outside." Thomas woke up immediately. His eyes were wide with concern. He grabbed his lantern and went to the door. He opened it slightly and looked out. He saw the shadow moving near the fence. He could not see the face, but he could see the shape of a person. Thomas whispered, "Stay inside with Jacob. Don't make any noise." Sarah nodded and moved to Jacob's room. She woke him quietly and told him to stay still. Jacob looked scared, but he trusted his mother. Sarah held his hand and whispered, "It's okay. Just stay quiet." Thomas stayed near the door, watching the shadow. He tried to think of what to do. He did not want to confront the person if it could be avoided. He wanted to protect his family, but he also did not want to cause trouble. The shadow moved closer to the house. Thomas could see that there were more than one. He saw 2 or 3 shapes near the fence. They were moving carefully, as if they were trying not to be seen. Thomas felt his fear grow. He knew that they could be in danger. He knew that he needed to act. He decided to speak to them. He stepped outside and called out in a calm voice, "Who is there?" The shadows stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then one of the shapes stepped forward. The person was a man with a tired face. He looked nervous, but he did not seem angry. He said, "We are travelers. We meant no harm."
We were just looking for a place to rest.
Thomas looked at him carefully. He did not trust him, but he also did not want to cause trouble. He said, "It is late. You cannot stay here." The man nodded and said, "We understand. We will leave." Thomas watched them move away. He waited until they were out of sight before going back inside. He felt relieved, but he also felt uneasy. He knew that the men might come back. He returned to Sarah and Jacob. He told them what had happened. Sarah listened carefully. She felt her heart pounding. She knew that the danger was real. Thomas said, "We need to leave. We cannot stay here if people are watching us." Sarah felt her heart sink. She did not want to leave. She did not want to lose the home they had built. But she also knew that Thomas was right. They could not stay if they were not safe. They made a plan. They decided to leave early in the morning, before anyone could notice. They would take only what they could carry. They would leave the rest behind. They would go to the nearest town and stay there until they could decide what to do. Sarah felt a deep sadness as she packed a small bag. She looked at the house one last time. She thought about the memories they had made there. She thought about the dreams they had for the future. She did not want to leave, but she also knew that her family was more important than any building. She knew that she had to be strong for Jacob. When the first light of morning appeared, they quietly left the house. They walked quickly toward the road, keeping their eyes on the distance. They did not look back. As they walked, Sarah felt her heart heavy. She thought about the life they had left behind. She thought about the danger that had forced them to leave. She wondered if they would ever return. Thomas held Jacob's hand tightly. He looked at Sarah and said, "We will be okay. We will find a new home."
We will start again. Sarah nodded, but she felt a deep worry.
She did not know what the future held. She only knew that they had to keep moving. As they walked toward the town, the world seemed larger than before. The plains stretched out in every direction. The wind moved through the grass, and the sky was bright, but the fear was still there, hidden in the back of Sarah's mind. They walked for hours, and finally they reached the town. It was small, but it was busy. People moved through the streets, trading goods and talking with each other. Sarah felt a small relief. The town felt safer than the isolated home. They found a small place to stay for the night. The owner was kind and offered them food. Sarah and Thomas thanked him and tried to relax, but the fear still followed them. That night, as they lay in bed, Sarah whispered to Thomas, "Do you think they will find us?" Thomas looked at her and said, "I don't know, but we will stay careful." Sarah nodded and closed her eyes. She tried to sleep, but her mind was filled with worry. She thought about the man near the fence. She thought about the way they watched the house. She wondered what they wanted. She did not know that the danger was not over. She did not know that the story was only beginning. Sarah woke up early, before the sun rose. The town was quiet, but the air felt busy with small noises, people moving, horses walking, and the sound of someone opening a door. She sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about their home and the way they had left it. Her mind felt heavy. She looked at Thomas, who was still sleeping, and felt a deep sadness. She wondered if they would ever return to their house. She wondered if their life would ever feel safe again. Jacob woke up soon after. He was sleepy, but he smiled when he saw his mother. He said, "Mom, are we gonna stay here forever?" Sarah hugged him gently. "Not forever, my love," she said. "But we will stay here for a while until we can decide what to do." Jacob nodded. He did not fully understand, but he trusted his parents. He loved the new place even though it felt strange. There were more people, more noise, and more things to see. He liked watching the horses and the carts moving through the streets. but he also missed the wide fields and the quiet of their old home. Thomas woke up and joined them. He had been thinking all night. He looked tired, but he was determined. He said, "We need to find out more about who was watching us. We need to know if it was just travelers or something more serious." Sarah nodded. "Yes," she said, "but how will we find out? We don't know anyone here." Thomas thought for a moment. Then he said, "We can talk to the sheriff. Maybe he knows something." Sarah looked worried. "Do you think the sheriff will help us?" Thomas nodded slowly. "We have to try," he said. "We cannot stay in fear. We need answers." They dressed quickly and walked toward the sheriff's office. The town was waking up, and people were starting their day. Some people looked at them with curiosity. They could tell that Sarah and Thomas were tired and worried, but no one said anything. Everyone seemed busy with their own lives. When they reached the sheriff's office, they saw a man standing outside. He looked strong and calm. His clothes were simple, but he carried himself with confidence. He had a friendly face, but his eyes were serious. Thomas approached him and said, "Excuse me, sir, we need to speak with the sheriff." The man nodded and said, "I am the sheriff. How can I help you?" Thomas explained their situation. He told the sheriff about their home, the marks near the fence, and the shadowy figures at night. He told him about the feeling that someone was watching them. The sheriff listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He looked at Thomas with a calm expression. When Thomas finished, the sheriff spoke. "You did the right thing by leaving. The frontier can be dangerous, and it is better to be safe than sorry. I will look into this." Sarah felt a small relief. She had expected the sheriff to be busy or uninterested, but he seemed to care. He asked for details, and he took notes. He asked about the direction the figures had come from, the time of night, and any details they could remember. Thomas answered as best as he could. He told the sheriff about the marks on the ground and the way the figures moved. The sheriff nodded and said, "I will send some men to check the area."
We will see if there are any signs of trouble. Sarah felt grateful.
She had not expected such help. She looked at Thomas, and they shared a small smile. For the first time in days, she felt a little hope. After they left the sheriff's office, they walked through the town. They saw shops and people selling goods. The town had a small market where people sold food, clothes, and tools. Sarah felt a sense of normal life again. She bought a small bag of flour and some vegetables. She wanted to make sure they had enough food. She also wanted to feel like they were building a new life. Thomas spoke with some of the local people. He asked if anyone had heard of travelers watching homes. He wanted to learn more about the area. Some people were helpful, but others were quiet. It was clear that the town had its own worries. People did not like to talk about danger. They preferred to keep their lives private. That afternoon, the sheriff returned. He looked serious, but he had news. He said, "We checked the area near your home. We found signs of people passing through. There are tracks, and it looks like they were moving quietly. It seems like they were looking for something." Sarah felt her heart tighten. "But what do you mean?" she asked. The sheriff replied, "It looks like they were looking for a family that was alone. They might be planning to take something from them. I cannot say for sure, but the signs are not good." Thomas felt his fear rise again. He looked at Sarah and said, "We need to do something. We cannot stay here and wait." The sheriff nodded. "You are right, but you must be careful. If you go back, you might be putting yourselves in danger. If you stay here, you might still be in danger. It is a difficult situation." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. She did not want to cry, but she could not help it. She thought of their home and the life they had built. She thought of the dream they had. She thought of Jacob. She did not want to lose everything. Thomas took her hand and squeezed it gently. "We will find a way," he said softly. "We will not let fear control us." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. She looked at Jacob, who was playing nearby. She felt a strong love for him. She knew that she had to stay strong for him. That evening, they returned to the place where they were staying. The owner greeted them kindly and asked if they needed anything. Sarah thanked him and said they were fine. They ate dinner quietly, and then they sat together. Sarah felt a sense of uncertainty. She did not know what to do next. She did not know if they should return home or stay in the town. She did not know if the danger was real or if it was only in their minds. Thomas spoke softly. "We need to think carefully. We cannot make a decision based on fear. We need to be smart." Sarah nodded.
"You are right," she said, "but I still feel like we are being watched."
"I feel like something is not right." Thomas looked at her. "We will be careful," he said. "We will stay together. We will not let them separate us." The next morning, they decided to visit the town's church. It was a small building, but it felt peaceful. The people there welcomed them warmly. The pastor spoke kindly and offered a prayer for their safety.
Sarah felt a sense of comfort. She felt like they were not alone.
She felt like there were people who cared. After the service, an older man approached them. He introduced himself as Mr. Jenkins. He had lived in the area for many years. He had seen many changes. He looked at Sarah and Thomas with a gentle expression and said, "I heard about your situation. I want to help." Sarah felt surprised. She asked, "How can you help?" Mr. Jenkins replied, "I know the land well. I know the people who travel through the area. If you want to go back, I can go with you. Dad, I can help you make sure it is safe." Thomas looked at Mr. Jenkins with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot." Sarah felt a warm feeling in her heart. She had not expected someone to offer help so kindly. She realized that even in a world filled with worry, there were still people who cared.
That afternoon, they made a plan. They would return to their home with Mr.
Jenkins. They would go together and check the area. They would make sure that the house was safe. If it was not safe, they would decide what to do next. The next morning, they packed a small bag and prepared to leave. Jacob looked at the town one last time. He looked nervous, but he also looked brave. He held his mother's hand tightly. Sarah looked at Thomas and said, "I hope we can return to our home. I hope we can feel safe again." Thomas nodded. "We will do our best," he said. "We will not give up." They left the town and began the journey back to their home. The road was long, but the sky was clear. The wind moved through the grass, and the world seemed calm. Sarah felt a small hope growing inside her. She believed that they could return to their life. She believed that they could make their home safe again. But she did not know what awaited them. She did not know that the danger was still close. She did not know that the outlaws had not forgotten them. As they walked, the sun began to set. The sky turned orange and red. The shadows grew longer. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. She looked at the distance and saw the shape of their home. It looked smaller than before. It looked quiet and empty. She felt a strange feeling in her stomach. She felt like something was wrong. Thomas noticed her fear. He held her hand and said, "We are almost there. Just stay calm." Sarah nodded, but her heart was still heavy. She did not know what they would find. She did not know if their home would still be there. As they approached the house, Sarah noticed something unusual. The fence was broken. The gate was open. The garden looked trampled. The animals were missing. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her chest. She could not breathe. She looked at Thomas, and her eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "No, this cannot be happening." Thomas stood still, staring at the broken fence. He felt his heart sink. He knew that something had happened. He knew that their home had been disturbed. He looked at Mr. Jenkins, who had stopped beside them. Mr. Jenkins looked at the scene and said quietly, "It looks like they were here."
They took the animals and left quickly. Sarah felt her body shake.
She could not believe it. She thought of their life, their dreams, and their home. She felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Thomas tried to stay calm. He said, "We need to check inside." They walked toward the house. The door was open. The inside was quiet. The furniture was still, but it felt empty. The air felt heavy, like something was missing. Sarah walked inside and looked around. She felt a deep sadness. She saw the small table where they used to eat. She saw the chairs. She saw the bed where they slept. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. It felt like the home had lost its heart. Thomas walked through the house, checking each room. He looked for signs of the people who had been there. He looked for any evidence that could tell them what had happened. Sarah stood near the window, looking out. She felt a deep fear. She wondered if the people who had been here had taken something else. She wondered if they had taken her. She thought of Jacob. She thought of his small hands. She thought of his smile. She felt a strong fear in her heart. Thomas returned to her and said, "They are gone. The animals are gone. The home is empty." Sarah felt her knees shake. She sat down on the floor. She felt like she could not breathe. She looked at Thomas and whispered, "Where is Jacob?" Thomas froze. His face turned pale. He looked at Sarah with wide eyes. He whispered, "He is not here." She stood up quickly, her legs shaking. She ran to the door and looked outside. She called Jacob's name, but there was no answer. She called again, louder this time. Her voice shook. Thomas joined her. He called Jacob's name too. They searched around the house, but there was no sign of him. The garden was empty. The fence was broken. The animals were gone. Sarah felt a deep fear. She felt as if her world had collapsed. She did not know what to do. She did not know where Jacob was. Thomas put his arm around her and said, "We need to find him. We need to search." Sarah nodded, but she felt tears in her eyes. She knew that the outlaws had taken Jacob. She knew that they had taken him away from her. She looked at Thomas and whispered, "We must find him." Thomas nodded. "We will," he said. "We will find him." Thomas and Sarah stood at the edge of their broken fence, staring at the empty fields. The wind moved through the tall grass and the sky looked wide and open. But the world felt smaller to them now. Their home, the place where they had built their dreams, had been taken from them. Their son, Jacob, was missing. The fear inside them grew stronger. It was like a heavy cloud that would not move. Thomas looked at Sarah and said, "We need to find him. We need to find Jacob right now." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered, "we cannot wait. We must search every place." Thomas took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. He knew that panic would not help. He had to think clearly. He looked around and tried to remember what they had seen earlier. The broken fence, the missing animals, the empty house. He wondered where the people had gone. He looked at Mr. Jenkins, who was standing beside them. Mr. Jenkins had lived in the area for many years. He knew the land, the paths, and the hidden trails. He had a calm presence, and his eyes showed experience. "Mr. Brow," Jenkins spoke softly, "we must follow the trail. The people who took the animals and Jacob would have left marks. We must look for them." Thomas nodded.
Yes, he said. Let's start. They began to search the area around the home.
They looked for footprints, broken branches, or any sign of movement. The ground was soft from the recent rain, so the marks were easier to see. They saw tracks leading away from the house toward the trees. Thomas followed the tracks carefully. Sarah followed closely behind, holding her bag tightly. Mr. Jenkins walked beside them, watching the trail with a steady gaze. They moved slowly, because they did not want to miss any sign. The wind moved through the trees, and the sounds of the forest filled the air. After walking for a while, they reached a small creek. The water flowed quietly, and the sound was calm. They saw more tracks near the water. The tracks were deeper here, and they looked like they had been made by people walking quickly. The trail continued beyond the creek into the trees. Thomas looked at the trail and felt a new fear. He wondered where the people were taking Jacob. He wondered if they would be safe. He wondered if they would find him in time. Sarah held her breath and said, "We must keep going." They continued walking, following the trail. The trees grew thicker, and the path became narrow. The sunlight was dim in the forest. The air felt cooler. Sarah felt her heart beating fast. She looked at Thomas and said, "Do you think we will find him?" Thomas nodded slowly. "We have to believe we will," he said. "We cannot lose hope." As they walked deeper into the forest, they heard a sound in the distance. It was a faint sound, like someone calling for help. She listened carefully. The sound came again, but it was too far away to be sure. She turned to Thomas and whispered, "Did you hear that?" Thomas nodded.
Yes, he said. It sounded like a voice. Mr.
Jenkins looked toward the sound. He said, "It might be Jacob. We must move quickly." They moved faster, following the direction of the sound. The forest grew thicker, and the path became harder to see. The sounds of birds and animals filled the air, but Sarah could only focus on the hope of finding her son. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope. She felt like she was walking in a dream. After a while, they reached a small clearing. In the middle of the clearing, there was a small camp. There were a few horses tied to trees, and a small fire was burning. The smoke rose into the sky. Sarah felt her heart sink. She knew that this was where the people had stopped. She looked around carefully. She saw a few men sitting near the fire. They looked tired and relaxed, as if they had been traveling for a long time. They were not paying attention to the forest around them. They seemed calm. Sarah felt her body shake. She knew that Jacob might be nearby. She also knew that she needed help. She looked at Thomas and whispered, "We need help." Thomas nodded. He looked at Mr. Quell. "Jenkins, what should we do?" he asked. Mr. Jenkins looked at the men, and then at the forest around them. He said, "We must be careful. We cannot go in alone. We need help from others who know the land well." Sarah felt a small hope. "Who can help us?" she asked. Jenkins looked toward the trees and said, "The Comanche. They know this land better than anyone. If we can find them, they can help us." Thomas looked surprised. He had heard stories about the Comanche. Some people were afraid of them, but Thomas had also heard that they were strong and honorable. He knew that they respected courage and kindness. He had heard that they helped people in need when they could. Thomas nodded slowly.
"We should try," he said.
We need their help. Sarah felt nervous. She did not know how the Comanche would respond. She wondered if they would trust them. She wondered if they would help. Mr. Jenkins said, "We must find them quickly." Mr. Jenkins said, "We must find them quickly. The trail is still fresh. If we wait too long, it will be harder to follow." They decided to move quickly. They left the camp behind and continued following the trail. The forest began to change. The trees grew taller and more spaced out. The path became wider. The air felt different. It felt like they were moving into a new part of the land. After walking for a while, they saw a group of people in the distance. They were moving quietly through the trees. Their clothes were different from the settlers' clothes. They wore simple garments, and they carried themselves with calm confidence. Their horses were strong and steady. Mr. Jenkins stopped and whispered, "This is them." The Comanche. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. She felt a mixture of fear and hope. She had never met the Comanche before. She had only heard stories. She did not know what to expect. She wondered if they would be kind or if they would be angry. Thomas stepped forward and called out softly, "Hello, we need help. Please, we are looking for our son." The Comanche stopped and looked at them carefully. They did not move quickly. They seemed calm and watchful. One of them, a man with strong eyes and a calm face, stepped forward. He looked at Thomas and Sarah and then at Mr. Jenkins. He spoke in a calm voice, but Thomas could not understand the words. Mr. Jenkins spoke a few words in the Comanche language, and the man nodded. He looked at Sarah and Thomas with a serious expression. Mr. Jenkins translated, "They want to know what happened." Thomas took a deep breath and explained the situation. He told them about their home, the missing animals, and the missing son. He told them that they had followed the trail and found the camp. He asked for their help. The Comanche man listened carefully. He did not show fear or anger. He looked thoughtful. After a moment, he spoke to Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins translated, "They will help. They will follow the trail with us." Sarah felt a rush of relief. Tears filled her eyes. She could not believe that they would help. She felt grateful. The Comanche man nodded and said, "We will move quickly. The land is ours. We know the paths. We will find your son." Thomas bowed his head slightly in thanks. He felt a deep respect for the Comanche. He felt grateful for their kindness. He felt hope for the first time in days. They continued their journey, now with the Comanche warriors leading the way. The Comanche moved with quiet confidence. They walked with a steady pace, and they seemed to know exactly where to go. The forest felt different now. It felt like they were not alone. It felt like they had a chance. As they followed the trail, the Comanche pointed out signs that Thomas and Sarah would have missed. They showed them marks on trees, broken branches, and footprints. They explained how the people had moved. They helped them understand the path. Sarah felt a deep gratitude. She looked at the Comanche and saw their strong faces. She realized that they were not the monsters she had heard about in stories. They were people who cared about the land and about helping others. She felt a new respect for them. After a long walk, they reached the area near the camp again. The Comanche moved quietly, and they seemed to be preparing for something. The Comanche man spoke to Thomas and Sarah through Mr. Jenkins. He said, "We will approach carefully. We will not cause trouble. We will bring your son back safely." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with tears. She felt hope and fear at the same time. She did not know what would happen next, but she trusted the Comanche. She trusted their strength and their wisdom. The Comanche moved forward, and the group followed. The forest grew quiet. The air felt tense. Sarah held Thomas's hand tightly. She felt her heart pounding. She thought of Jacob and prayed silently for his safety. They moved closer to the camp. The Comanche were silent and focused. They surrounded the camp quietly, using the trees for cover. The men at the camp were still there, unaware of the approaching group. The Comanche leader raised his hand slightly, and the group stopped. He spoke softly to the others. They nodded. The Comanche moved forward, and the camp became visible. Sarah felt her breath catch. She could see the men near the fire. She could see the horses. She could see the camp clearly. She waited, holding her breath, hoping for the best. Then she saw something that made her heart jump. In the distance, near the edge of the camp, she saw a small figure. It was Jacob. He was sitting on the ground, looking tired and scared. He looked up, and his eyes met Sarah's. Sarah felt tears fall from her eyes. She wanted to run to him, but she knew they had to be careful. She looked at Thomas, who was also looking at Jacob. He felt a deep relief. He felt hope. The Comanche leader nodded, and the group moved forward carefully. The men at the camp noticed them. They stood up quickly, but the Comanche were already moving with strength and control. The Comanche surrounded the camp, and the men stopped moving. The Comanche leader spoke in a calm voice. He did not shout or threaten. He spoke with a strong, quiet confidence. The men at the camp looked nervous. They did not know what to do. Sarah watched from a distance, her heart pounding. She saw the Comanche leader speak again, and the men at the camp nodded slowly. It was clear that the Comanche were in control. The situation felt calm but powerful. Then, the Comanche leader turned and looked toward Jacob. He nodded to one of his men. The man moved quickly and gently toward Jacob. He spoke softly to him, and Jacob looked up with wide eyes. The Comanche man picked Jacob up carefully and carried him toward Sarah and Thomas. Jacob looked scared, but he also looked relieved. He reached out to his mother, and Sarah took him in her arms. Sarah held Jacob tightly. She felt a deep emotion inside her. She felt relief, love, and gratitude. She looked at him and whispered, "You are safe now." He said, "Mom, I was scared." Sarah whispered, "I know, but you are safe now." Thomas stood beside them, his eyes filled with tears. He looked at the Comanche and felt a deep respect. He felt grateful for their help. He felt a new understanding of the land and its people. The Comanche leader nodded to them, and then he spoke softly. Mr. Jenkins translated, "They say that the land belongs to everyone, and they do not like to see children taken."
They will make sure you are safe. Sarah nodded, her voice shaking.
"Thank you," she said. "Thank you for saving my son." The Comanche leader nodded again. He looked at them with a calm expression. Then he turned and walked away, leading his group back into the forest. Sarah watched them go. She felt a deep sense of gratitude. She also felt a new understanding. She realized that people could be kind, even if they were different. She realized that courage could come from unexpected places. As they walked back toward their home, Sarah held Jacob close. She felt the weight of what had happened. She knew that their lives would never be the same, but she also knew that they had been given a second chance. She looked at Thomas and said, "We must be grateful. We must remember this." Thomas nodded. "Yes," he said, "we will never forget." They continued walking, the forest growing quiet behind them. The sun was beginning to set, and the sky turned orange and pink. The world looked beautiful again, but Sarah knew that the memory of this day would stay with her forever. She felt a new sense of hope. She felt a new sense of strength. She knew that their family was not alone. She knew that there were people who cared. She knew that they would keep moving forward, no matter what. And she knew that the Comanche warriors had changed her life forever. When Sarah held Jacob in her arms, she felt like the world had returned to its proper place. His small body felt warm and real, and the fear that had been living in her chest began to slowly leave. She looked at him and saw his eyes filled with tears, but also with relief. He had been through something he could not fully understand, but he knew he was safe now.
Do you home now?
We will never leave you again. Thomas stood beside them, his face filled with a deep emotion. He looked at his son and then at Sarah. For a moment, he seemed unable to speak. His heart was full of gratitude. He had been scared that he would never see his son again. He had been afraid that their family would be broken forever. But now, Jacob was safe. They were together again. The Comanche leader had already begun to move away with his group, returning to the forest. Sarah wanted to thank him again, but she also knew that words might not be enough. She did not want to interrupt. She watched as the Comanche moved with quiet strength, like shadows blending into the trees. They seemed calm and confident, and Sarah felt a deep respect for them. Mr. Jenkins walked beside Sarah and Thomas. He had been quiet for most of the journey back. Now he spoke softly. They will not forget what happened here. They will watch the area for a while to make sure you are safe. Sarah nodded. She felt a sense of comfort in his words. She realized that they had been helped by people who cared, and she felt grateful for their kindness. They continued walking toward their home. The sun was setting, and the sky was painted with beautiful colors. The air felt fresh and cool. The world looked peaceful, but Sarah knew that things would not be the same again. She knew that their home had been changed by what had happened. She knew that their lives would have a new meaning now. As they reached the edge of the forest, they saw their home in the distance. The broken fence was still there. The garden looked damaged. The house looked quiet and empty. Sarah felt a sadness in her heart. She had hoped that they could fix everything and return to normal, but she knew that their home had been changed forever. Thomas walked ahead and looked at the house. He took a deep breath and said, "We will fix it. We will rebuild." Sarah looked at him and nodded.
Yes, she said. We will rebuild.
But we must also remember what happened. We must learn from it. Jacob held his mother's hand tightly. He looked at the house with a small frown. He seemed confused, but he also seemed brave. He did not fully understand the danger he had faced. He only knew that he had been scared and that his parents had come for him. He looked up at his father and said, "Dad, will we be safe now?" Thomas knelt down and looked into his son's eyes. He smiled gently and said, "Yes, my boy, we will be safe. We will make sure of it." Sarah felt a warmth in her heart. She knew that they had to make a plan. They had to make their homes stronger. They had to make sure that no one could take their family again. They began to clean up the area around the house. They fixed the broken fence and repaired the gate. They cleared the garden and planted new seeds. They worked together, and the work helped them feel stronger. The work helped them feel like they were taking control of their lives again. Days passed, and the family slowly began to rebuild. The work was hard, but they did not give up. Thomas built a stronger fence, and he made sure that the house was secure. He built a small lookout post near the edge of the property, where he could watch the area. Sarah planted new vegetables and took care of the animals that were still there. She also taught Jacob how to stay safe and how to be aware of his surroundings. Jacob was a brave child. He listened carefully to his parents. He learned to stay close to the house and to never wander alone. He also learned to be respectful and kind to others. Sarah wanted him to grow up strong, but she also wanted him to be gentle and thoughtful. The town where they had stayed also helped them. The owner of the small place where they had lived offered them food and supplies. The sheriff visited them often to make sure they were safe. The community began to feel like a family. Sarah realized that they were not alone. There were people who cared. One day, the sheriff came to their home. He stood at the gate and spoke to Thomas. "We have been watching the area," he said. "We have not seen any signs of the people who took your son. It seems they have moved away." Thomas nodded. "Ham, double take. Thank you," he said. "We appreciate your help." Sarah stood beside him and said, "We will never forget what you did for us." The sheriff nodded and smiled. "We are all part of this community," he said. "We look out for each other." As the weeks passed, the family began to feel a new sense of normal. The garden grew again. The animals returned. The house felt like a home again. Sarah felt a sense of peace that she had not felt in a long time. She realized that the fear had begun to fade, but she also realized that the experience had changed her. She could not forget the feeling of fear when Jacob was missing. She could not forget the worry that had filled her days. She could not forget the kindness of the Comanche warriors. She knew that her life had been touched by something powerful. One evening, Sarah sat on the porch with Jacob. The sky was clear and the stars were bright. Jacob looked up and asked, "Mom, why did they help us?" Sarah thought for a moment. She looked at the sky and then at her son. She said, "They helped us because they believed it was the right thing to do. They did not want to see a child in danger. They believed in kindness." Jacob nodded slowly. "They were good people," he said. Sarah smiled.
"Yes, they were," she said, "and we should remember that." She looked at her son and felt a deep love.
She knew that he would grow up with a new understanding of the world. She knew that he would learn to see people, not as stories or rumors. She knew that he would grow up with a sense of gratitude and respect. Thomas joined them on the porch. He sat down beside Sarah and put his arm around her. He looked at the stars and said, "We are lucky. We were given a second chance." Sarah nodded. "Yes," she said. "We are lucky." The next day they decided to visit the town again. They wanted to thank the people who had helped them. They wanted to share their story, not to scare anyone, but to show the importance of kindness and unity. They wanted to remind people that help could come from unexpected places. When they arrived in town, they were welcomed warmly. The owner of the small place where they had stayed greeted them with a smile. The sheriff shook Thomas's hand and said, "I'm glad to see your family safe." Sarah spoke to the people in the town. She told them what had happened, but she also spoke about the Comanche warriors. She told them how they had helped and how they had shown kindness. She told them that people should not judge others without knowing them. Some people listened carefully. Some people were surprised. Some people had never thought of the Comanche in a kind way. Sarah's words made them think. She could see that their faces were changing. She could see that they were beginning to understand. After the meeting, a few people approached Sarah and Thomas. They thanked them for sharing the story. They said that they had never heard it told that way before. They said that they would remember the kindness of the Comanche. Sarah felt a warm feeling in her heart. She realized that their story had become more than a personal experience. It had become a lesson for the community. It had become a reminder that kindness and respect could bring people together. How bonnet. On the way back home, Sarah looked at the land and felt a deep appreciation. She thought about the way the Comanche had moved through the forest. She thought about the way they had helped without expecting anything in return. She thought about how they had changed her view of the world. When they returned home, the family continued to work hard. They continued to rebuild. They continued to grow stronger. They knew that life could still be difficult, but they also knew that they had the strength to face it. One evening, as the sun set, Thomas looked at Sarah and said, "I think we should build a stronger home, a place that can protect us, but also a place that feels warm and welcoming." Sarah nodded. "Yes," she said, "we will build it together." Jacob smiled and said, "Can I help too?" Thomas laughed softly. "Of course you can," he said. "You will help us build our future." Sarah looked at her son and felt a deep hope. She knew that their family would continue to grow. She knew that they would continue to work hard. She knew that they would always remember the day when the Comanche warriors saved their son. And she knew that their story would always remind them that kindness can come from anyone, and that people can be brave and caring, even in the most difficult moments. As the night grew dark, the family sat together, feeling safe and grateful. The wind moved through the trees and the stars shone above. The world felt peaceful again. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. She thanked the land, the people who helped them, and the Comanche warriors who had saved her son. She knew that life would continue and that there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew that they would face them together. She knew that their family would never forget the kindness they received. She knew that their story would live on, not as a story of fear, but as a story of hope.